I'm Catherine Arndt, the Chief of the VLGA Connect Studio. Welcome to today's episode, brought to you by the VLGA, your councillor support network and the national broadcaster on all things local government.
Welcome everyone to VLGA Connect, and it's time for another in our Local Leaders series. Today we're going to get to know the CEO of Moyne Shire Council in southwest Victoria. Brett Davis joins me. Hi Brett.
G'day Chris, good to see you.
And you, thank you for coming on the program. How's life for you in Moyne Shire at the moment?
A bit hectic on the day that we're filming. There's certainly been some wild winds and damage going on, but got a great staff and team around me, so we're going well to address those concerns.
I hear a lot of talk out of Moyne about wind. A hairy, windy day. Is that good or bad for wind power production?
Yes, well, the great irony there is it's too windy for wind farms on a day like today.
Right.
I've heard many of your podcasts so far, or your interviews, which has been terrific, and some people who are bracing for the renewable challenge. That's one of the challenges, that it can be too windy.
I did not know that, so thank you for that. All right, so one of the things we like to do on this is get to know you a little bit, Brett. You're reasonably new as a CEO, if you don't mind me saying, appointed last year for a 4-year term. You're not new to local government, though. How far back does your association with the sector go?
Yeah, it's a there and back again tale, Chris. I started at Brimbank just post amalgamations in '94, I think it was, as a junior planner or as a planner at the time, and spent several years traipsing as people do through various inner and outer councils. Probably got out of local government into state for a period. And then eventually I found my way back. And even when I was consulting, I was generally consulting to local government to try and help, because it's been a passion and an interest of mine always in terms of the public good and working on outcomes for councils. So that was the predominance of my work. So it's great to be back and in the big chair, as they call it.
And for a while there, you mentioned state. You were with the Victorian Planning Authority, which, I mean, that itself hasn't been around for a long, long time, has it?
No, in various iterations, probably about 15 plus years. It was the Growth Areas Authority once upon a time, but my role was exec director at the VPA for regional Victoria, and that got me around, I think I was dealing with at the time about 28 regional and rural cities and towns with their ambitious program. So it was terrific to see and get to know a lot of great people in the industry for local government, and probably ignited a bit of an interest and passion to come back at a senior level.
So planning's obviously in the blood, Brett. How do you go stepping above that into a CEO role? Do you find your planning background helps you with the CEO role, or a hindrance, or neither?
Oh, it certainly helps. Like with everyone that I've been listening to with your interviews, your area of expertise you tend to fall back on, so you've got a little bit of that covered. It's very hard to stay out of the day-to-day. Planning is something that I, as many CEOs, get lots of calls on, and my challenge is not to answer it straight away, because I have very capable staff that's their role now. I've got a broader organisation to work with, but it's good to have up your sleeve, no doubt. There's not many of us that have come from planning backgrounds, but I see a few more popping up, so that's always good. And my fellow contemporary at Warrnambool, Andrew Mason, Andrew and I went to uni together, did the planning course together. So it's quite ironic many years later that we now sit around the table at our regional groupings, and it's quite funny sometimes to think about that.
That's extraordinary. It is a small sector. And as you say, it's not the most common path to CEO. You probably more often see a finance background or engineering background, etc., a little bit more of the OD background these days. But your predecessor there at Moyne, who I know well, also had a significant planning career in his local government background, Bill Miller, didn't he? So how was it being the planning director reporting to a CEO with planning experience?
Oh, look, it was terrific. And one of the things that drew me back to Moyne at the time was I've worked with Bill along the journey. Bill was very much one of the economic development sort of, it was a great way of thinking that he had around planning as an enabler. And so it was a seamless transition to work with Bill, and also learnt a great deal. Would have liked to have learnt more.
Yeah.
I had so I came in January 2020 to local government back at a senior level as a director, and then of course about 4 weeks later we had a beautiful pandemic that kicked
Yes.
off. So I hadn't known until recently Moyne without that. So it was a really strong period of just getting around staff and making sure services and continuity of delivery for our community continued. Bill was terrific during that. I was one of 4 on the executive, but by the 12 months after, once Bill had said he was sailing off into the sunset, the corporate services director and the engineering director also retired. So I had the old cricket parlance of Lily, Chappell and Marsh all retiring at the same time, and being fortunate to get the gig. Had its ups and downs, but it's allowed me to actually bring in an executive that I've had a hand in employing, which has been terrific. And they left us in good stead, though, to carry on post-COVID.
Was that the direction you were planning to go in when you returned in that senior role in early 2020? Was being a CEO part of the plan so quickly?
It was part of the plan. The date was never known. I knew that Bill, he was probably going to go 1 or 2 terms, and he decided, as a lot of people did after the COVID years, which were like dog years in local government, felt like 7 years in one. He decided that it was time to move on, and I was fortunate enough to get in front of the councillors and get the gig. So. Yes, it's been an accelerated path. In Southwest Victoria, of the sort of 7 councils in our grouping, I think I came on in an acting from March, got it in June. There have been, every one of those councils has changed CEOs. So I'm almost a veteran in this region. And that had been on the back of a long-standing, there were probably CEOs who hadn't moved for 5+ years across the board.
Yeah, I think it's a factor of this term of council too, the turnover of CEOs. You're not the only region that would have a statistic like that. Hopefully stability now for some time to come. But I'm also wondering, given all of the talk at the moment about potential changes to planning powers of councils, particularly coming out of Operation Sandon, what's your take on that as a CEO with strong planning experience about the direction it seems to be going?
It's intriguing, Chris, and have certainly been following the governance update every Friday to sort of get the latest thinking on that, and working with Tony as well as other colleagues in the MAV, Julie Reid, who we use. Look, it's frustrating that it seems that planning and councils and planning seem to have been painted as the villain here. There is a lot of subject matter expertise that seems to have been put to one side because we have an extremely serious investigation and activity that's been uncovered through the Sandon report. It's not to say that there isn't change needed. We've been advocating that the change in planning should occur for a long time around certain elements of it. I mean, the Act itself is 1987. It's been tweaked. It doesn't necessarily cut the mustard for modern day planning. And that's really around timeframes. So if the government's thinking that by removing councils out of the equation, they're going to get quicker results on the ground, I challenge that, given that local government often does go through all the hoops in a panels process, and then it goes into the great machine at 8 Nicholson Street and sits in abeyance. So how is that going to improve? So we're working closely with VLGA and MAV and LG Pro around trying to have some voice at the table. We feel that we're put to one side in some respects. So looking forward to seeing what comes of that. Change is due. There is no ifs or buts in that regard.
Some of the narrative just in the last week or two has been about all of the developments that have been approved but not acted on. And if they were, we wouldn't be talking about the sorts of numbers required in terms of housing. Is that an issue to any extent in Moyne?
Not to that extent. We're traditionally a low growth shire, but we generally tick along every year. So that's not an issue per se, but our issue is that we've done strategic planning work that's been based on 5+ years in 3 separate amendments and all gone through the process and lodged and in there, and they would open up probably for us another 1% of housing across the Shire, and they are sitting. They are sitting with no response.
Right.
So it's kind of like, well, the strategic work has been done. It's been tested by a panel. The council and the panel have said tick, tick. And then, understanding that there's a lot on the minister's desk, but there are quick fixes out there, and we think we've got some to get going. As is the traditional model of bricks and mortar housing, that discussion needs to change into there are very good modular solutions too.
How long, we'll come back to that in just a second. How long generally would you expect it takes to get one of those strategic pieces of work through the other side of the minister's approval?
It change. It's a little bit like VCAT decisions, that they've blown out to 12+ months. For a panel, if it's ticked all the boxes, it shouldn't be more than 6 months. But we find, and there's 2 pieces of work there that this council has grappled with for, as I said, 5+ years. And for a small council with 1.5 strategic planners and a lot of money dedicated, when you do get them over the line, you expect that you at least then can see the light of day with them. So we understand it's frustrating for our community. We're in the midst, as most councils are, of a housing crisis. We can't get early learning workers. We can't get nurses, teachers, all sorts, because they're interested in a job and then there's no housing available. It's a tricky one. And in a place like Port Fairy, a tourist town, you've also got that issue of there's houses here, but they're all Airbnb or short-term accommodation. And we've looked at all those models around stinging them with a little bit more of rates, this, that, and the other, but it's cost recovery for those owners. There's not an interest to open up the home. We understand that, but it is frustrating.
So you are not looking like going down the path that some have with annual caps on the short-term rentals as well as the registration fees?
No, because we've seen where that's happened and it seems to just be absorbed and it doesn't affect it. Ultimately, you've also got an issue of trying to enforce those caps. Who at council is going to go around and monitor how many days someone is staying in a certain house? It's practically impossible.
Yeah, good point. Yeah. So on the housing, you've received some attention for a couple of innovative things you've done, particularly in the key worker housing space, if I recall correctly. We had a chat quite a few months ago about that. Tell us about what you've done there that's a little bit different.
So identifying the market failure a couple of years ago, we were fortunate enough to then trial a scheme with regards to cabins in a couple of our caravan parks centrally located in our Mortlake and Koroit towns, where we then ran an expression of interest to local businesses in those towns for people to come in and stay through the businesses. So we would strike leases with the businesses for their workers. And that had been oversubscribed ever since we've done it to the power of 4. So like we've got 5 in Koroit, 5 in Mortlake, and we would have 35+ on a wait list, showing you that there's a demand. And what happens over that 12 months, they then generally find an available house within those towns. So they move out and we get someone else in. And that's enabled businesses to employ arborists, nurses, critical care workers, people for Midfield Meats and Bega, 2 of our bigger employers as well. So we found it's a good way into areas. And once you're in and known, you generally chances of getting a house seems to improve as well. And so we're working with the government and Minister Shin certainly on trying to get more of those, because they were delivered within a 6-month period. The turnaround was quick. It had been a really successful pilot program for us.
Well done, and I imagine well received, not just within Moyne, but it would be of interest more broadly too. Have you had inquiries from other municipalities as to what you've done?
Certainly have, and I recently spoke at the Rural Councils Victoria at Echuca, and certainly I've been inundated since then as well. And it's a credit to the councillors too, who took the plunge and said, okay, let's give this a go. We'll back it in. And the government, co-funded with us a number of those. And we've now got the demonstrated and lived experience to say, well, this should be an option across the board, and we're happy to share that with anyone.
Wind. Let's talk about wind. We touched on it earlier very briefly, and we've talked about this with your Mayor, Karen Foster, on another edition of the program, but it is a vexing issue in the renewable space, isn't it, where you're not actually the decision maker on a lot of these things, but it's having great impacts potentially on your community.
It certainly is. There's a couple of real key elements. A lot of people, as I said at the start, they're getting ready for the transition. So thinking around Gippsland and listening to Karen's interview the other day, which is terrific, and we're working with Karen, giving some shared experience. Moyne's got 6 in operation, 6 wind farms in operation, 4 in construction, 4 more on the books. If they're all built, that's 900,000 homes we're powering. That's 12.5% of our land area. And that's 2.3 gigawatts of electricity generated. That's huge numbers. We power the state. Unabashedly, we say we're an agricultural powerhouse, and now we're an electricity powerhouse.
Wow.
Having said all of that, not one person in Moyne Shire derives any benefit from cheaper power or power from those wind farms. They're like a highway, and they go into Melbourne. We don't have the off-ramp per se. So we're really working with VicGrid and the government around some better deals for the host. Not the ones that have turbines on their sites. They have they do get some financial benefit from it, but then the communities in and around that, and how we can really work with that. Based on that 12%, basically, if you think of the 672 square kilometres that makes up, that's the city of Wyndham. So the city of Wyndham is wind farms in our shire. So geographically, we're 5,500 square kilometres. People will say, "Oh, well, you've got plenty of room," but they do have a mark on the landscape, particularly if it's an uninterrupted view. The council has a view at the moment of pausing that planning until the greater view of cumulative impacts is assessed, and the sort of the spaghetti wire of transmission is dealt with. So we do have those issues, a community of interest that feels like they've been left behind, but acknowledging the absolute challenge of the state for us to deliver on a renewable future. And we're up for that, but we have to be cognizant we've got to play to the community who think that we have the ultimate say, when, as you quite clearly articulated, it's a state government call at the end, and we've just got a seat at the table.
And they're big numbers that you've just outlined there. Tourism is a big factor for you economically. Do the wind turbines attract people who want to see them and take photos, that sort of thing? Are they a tourist attraction in and of themselves?
Oh, to a very small extent, but
Yeah.
No, not really. I think once upon a time, we've got 2 wind farms that are 20 years old that were the first 2. That was probably the curiosity factor, but now you can generally go and see turbines everywhere. Offshore's the next great horizon, and we're in the mix for that as well. So we'll see whether people want to come and have a look at them from the beach.
Yeah.
Well, we're very proud of our tourism product. Port Fairy is one of the top tourist town 2 years in a row. The team works pretty hard, and the town swells from 3 to 14, 15,000 people over summer. And we've then put in some workforce initiatives to support our local businesses by opening up lodge placements for the temporary staff that goes to the local businesses. The stay, work and play, the retirees initiative, which I think Warrnambool pinched as though saying they're the first. No, it was a Moyne thing.
Really? Here we go. Some scandal. I was just going to ask you, have you copied what Warrnambool's done? But it's the other way around.
That is correct. So we've had the nomads coming in, and I've got nomads working with us, staying at our caravan parks, and it's a terrific initiative. But we'll happily share with our neighbours. That's okay. We punch above our weight.
You missed the opportunity to put a catchy name on it. They called it Unretiring the Bool, and they own it now. I'm sorry to tell you, Brett.
And that's okay. They can have that.
But tourism generally is going well and recovered fully. And how does your infrastructure keep up with that huge influx that you just described?
Tourism really has benefited and continues to grow even during lockdowns. I think we had a few people fleeing and enjoying our lifestyle during the 5K lockdowns in Melbourne. And the infrastructure is always a challenge with that surge, but we plan in advance and we do our best. Things are getting busy when you've got to start queuing for your coffee. And it's small things as a local, but we welcome the tourists and the investment that they provide, because Moyne really benefits from the tourism package, particularly Port Fairy and Koroit at this stage.
So when you want a holiday, where do you go, Brett?
It's hard to be a CEO in a holiday town during holiday periods, because you keep walking around going, "Oh, those bins are full."
Exactly.
Like car parks in Strife. What are we going to do about that EV charger? It's an interesting question, Chris, isn't it, about how you turn off, particularly when you live and work in the town that you're in. So look, I've got kids in another part of the state, big fans of this podcast and show. So I better do a shout out to them, because they'll say, "Dad, did you give us a shout out?"
Excellent.
And so I tend to get around a little bit in that regard. I've got family still in Ballarat and Shepparton, so use that to sort of get out of the Shire sometimes. But it's a pretty good place to work and live. That's the recruitment pitch in terms of, if you want lifestyle in abundance, Moyne Shire can deliver on that for you.
I didn't realise we had a Shepparton connection in common, Brett.
Yes, well, I've had a number of people say that you were on the radio here once upon a time, or in Shep, and I've got 3 of my kids live in Shepparton, so.
Well, there you go. Yeah, well, it's hometown for me. So where do you see yourself 5-10 years from now, Brett? Is this the pinnacle of your career, being the CEO there at Moyne, or have you got other career plans?
Oh, big question. Look, I'm really enjoying it. I think I'm now in the proper swimming lane. It's been a bumpy 12 months for various reasons, as all CEOs encounter. And I really want to see the first contract through and see where that leads. There's opportunity there, but I also take, I take the time to check in with more experienced people in the game. I've been lucky enough to have people like Calvin Spiller through the XLP program, sort of be a mentor. That program itself, I think, has now spurned 3 or 4 CEOs from when I was in it. So we become a close set as well at the beginning end, but then also great people like Craig Neiman, who is always willing to share a view or be a sounding board. And some of my more contemporaries, Karen in particular and Bernie, have always reached out when there's things that we might have done that they need, or vice versa. I really value their input, and CEOs are a sharing bunch, I've come to discover. So it's terrific. The role of a CEO can be lonely. I think that's a recurring theme in your chats you're having with us.
Yes.
But it's important to have a couple of trusted advisors to reach out to, and I've certainly got a couple of those, which is very handy and not necessarily in the industry.
Well, Brett, it's been great to chat with you. Congratulations on what you're achieving there at Moyne. I think it's genuinely one of those small shires around the state that you could say is punching above its weight on a number of metrics. So all power to you. And thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us today on Local Leaders.
No worries, Chris. Been great to have a chat.
Brett Davis is the CEO at Moyne Shire Council, with us on Local Leaders today from VLGA Connect.